Here are 3 general scary stories submitted by subscribers. LadySpook joins me to tell the second story in the compilation. Please visit her channel to see 3 more stories, one read by Killer Orange Cat. There will be links included in both the video and the description for the video. Enjoy. Number 1. The Roommate. This story isn't really as scary as it is weird and, I guess, mildly funny. Or at least it would be if it hadn't happened to me. Everyone always told me that I shouldn't look for a roommate on Craigslist. But sometimes it's really the only way you can find a roommate. I did that once, and I can tell you next time, I'd rather go without the roommate than to find one on Craigslist. I'm a 23-year-old male, and this happened about a year ago. I had been out of college for about a year at that point, and I got a job working in an actuary firm. I wanted to work my way up the ladder, so I put in long hours at work. I was an exempt employee though, so my extra work did not equal extra pay. In order to make ends meet, I put an ad online in order to find a new roommate. I met Chris, and I liked him right away. He was about my age, and he was still in college. He had his degree in psychology, and was going after his master's degree in social work. He was able to easily afford the room. I figured a student was a good way to go because he would likely be at school a whole lot. When he was home, I figured he would be studying. He was also from out of town, so I didn't expect him to have many friends over. Chris moved in, and things were alright for a while. I didn't see him very often, just as I had predicted beforehand. I'd get home, and the house would be dark and empty. I generally made my meal and then made my way into my bedroom. I would hear Chris come in later at night. He often just went right to his room and closed the door, not to be heard of again for the rest of the night. Perfect, right? Not really. It was one thing to keep to oneself, but I literally never saw Chris at all. It went from being an interesting novelty to realizing that I knew nothing about this man. And when you don't really know someone, your mind will very often not know what to reasonably expect from him. And things got weird, too. A couple months after Chris had moved in, 3 days went by where Chris had not gotten up to go to school. I figured he was sick, and I was actually not feeling well myself. So, on the 4th day, I decided myself to stay home from work. I needed my rest and felt like a cold was coming on. I did not let Chris know that I was not leaving for work. I heard him get up. I heard him moving around the house, and I heard him close and latch and lock the door. I just figured that whatever he had been staying home lately, the reason must have expired, and he left. I got up around noon to go and make myself some lunch. When I walked in the hallway, though, I noticed that the computer light was on and shining under the door of Chris's room. I was slightly irritated because I knew leaving the computer on all day would just cause the electric bill to go up. I began wondering if he had been doing this all the time. When I was walking back to my room, I heard something moving around in the room. It really caught me off guard because I knew that Chris had left. I immediately thought he had an animal or something, or even possibly a girlfriend in the room. I thought about knocking on the door, but then I thought I'd be more comfortable just talking to Chris when he came home. I was still not feeling well, so I ended up going to sleep. I woke up later that night when I heard Chris open the door and walk into the house. I remembered that I wanted to talk to him, but I was still feeling sick and groggy, and couldn't pull myself out of bed. I saw the light go on in the hallway, and I saw Chris's feet stop outside my bedroom door. He stood there for several moments, and I assumed he was going to knock on the door. But after a while, I saw the feet move away. I heard him messing around in the kitchen, and then I saw the feet come back to my doorway. I then heard something I didn't expect, and he grabbed my doorknob and tried turning it. I kept my door locked because, as I said before, I really didn't know Chris. And not knowing somebody was a good enough reason to keep your door locked when they were in your house. My heart began pounding because the entire situation had just been getting weirder and weirder. After failing to open the door, Chris walked away from the door. I watched the hallway light go off, and after a few moments, I heard the outside door open, and I heard Chris leaving the house. Not feeling well, but completely bent out of shape, I forced myself to get up. I got out into the hallway, and I immediately went and locked the chain on the front door. I had no idea what Chris had been up to, but I wasn't about to let him back into my house until I knew. I decided to find out what was happening in Chris's room. Even though it was my house, my heart was beating hard as I made my way to his door. It was odd that I was so scared because he wouldn't be able to get back into the house with the door chain being closed. But I grabbed the doorknob and slowly began to open the door. Opening it, I expected the worst, but was completely shocked at what I saw. Chris, completely naked, was tied spread eagle on the top of his bed. He had a ball gag in his mouth and a catheter inserted into him. He also had cuts on his body that were not bandaged. When he saw me, he both turned red and seemed very, very frantic. I hurried over to the bed and took the ball gag out of his mouth. Apparently what had happened was that Chris was into some kinky things and a date over tied him up. The person then left him tied up while living in my house, eating food, sleeping, and walking around in the house. She had been cutting him and broadcasting the cutting on the internet. This had been going on for several days. I got Chris free and we called the police. The person tried coming into the house later that night and got arrested. Upon being searched, one of my kitchen knives was found on her. It freaked me out thinking that person was standing outside the door of my room, holding that knife, and maybe thinking she was going to do to me what she had been doing to Chris. Chris still lives with me, but I expressly forbid any sort of bondage in the house.
Okay, so this happened to me last night, around 11:30 p.m. or somewhere around there. The highway was under construction, so it was one lane and two concrete walls on either side of me. And there's a truck driving in front of me, but I can't see past him. So we're going 70 miles an hour, and there's no vehicles behind me. He locks his brakes in front of me, and so I stop, but I think nothing of it, just thought maybe another vehicle stopped in front of him. So we continue on our merry way, and then we stop again. But still, I don't think anything of it, due to the fact that I can't see past him. The road widens to two lanes, a shoulder and a regular, so I pull into the shoulder to see around him. But there isn't anyone in front of him, so I pull back into my lane and he stops yet again. And that's when I thought that was a bit weird. A few minutes of this and he begins weaving in between the two lanes. He stops and I stop. I grab my phone at this point and dial 911, but I don't press the call button as the truck in front of me begins moving again. Now, I own a Volvo racing vehicle, so whenever I get into a situation like this, like traffic, start, stop, I just put one hand on the steering wheel and one switching gears manually. So I set my phone down to get up to speed, and we get up to 70 and I pick up my phone. And he brakes at this point and my phone goes flying across the car. I didn't click call yet and my phone is on the floorboard somewhere. He starts again, and so do I. He stops again after a few seconds and he starts yet again, getting up to about 50 before he stops again. At this point, I think that if there is a car behind me and if they rear end me, I'd go underneath this truck in front of me, and that scares me quite a bit. Now, I understand that you're wondering why I didn't pass him. Well, I attempted it multiple times while stopped, and he immediately picked up speed and crossed into the lane I was trying to pass him in. He starts yet again, and I start yet again, and we get up to about 70, and I gain the courage to pass him, and I get halfway up his truck, about 3/4 of the trailer I pass before he rapidly turns to the right. Not slowly and gradually, but quite fast. So I slam on my brakes and I can't slow down any faster. If he hits me, I go into the concrete wall and go airborne, so I'm trying to avoid that. I'm about an inch away from taking out my left view mirror. I was that close to the wall. His back tires just barely missed me. They were a couple of inches away. Thank God I hadn't gone any faster, and thank God I didn't make it any closer to the cab, for if I did, I definitely wouldn't have been able to type this up. I'm pretty sure his goal is to kill me. I pass him about a minute later when it splits into 3 lanes. So, truck driver who was set on killing me last night, let's not meet.
Number 3. Guilt. Warning. This story has a very graphic depiction of the accidental death of an animal. I know that some of my viewers are very sensitive about this sort of thing, and I figured that a verbal warning would be much better than a written one. If you think the story may disturb you, please skip it. It is unpleasant and disturbing. Also, please be aware, Killer Orange Cat in no way condones the actions of the narrator or his friend in this story. My friend Jeb and me were out smoking pot one night in the woods. We were 17 when this story happened, and both of our parents would have killed us if they knew we were smoking. So we had a nice camping area that we hung out at when we were smoking or even drinking. We got into Jeb's truck about 1 a.m. and he was going to take me home. Yeah, it was stupid getting behind the wheel after he was smoking, but trust me, we paid for it. We were driving down a country road, just talking and laughing, when Jeb took his eyes off the road. I, however, had my eyes on the road, and I saw a medium-sized dog standing right in the middle. I yelled at Jeb, but he wasn't able to stop the truck before hitting the hound. The truck skidded to the side of the road. Jeb grabbed his flashlight, and we both got out of the car. When Jeb shined his flashlight on the dog, I saw the worst thing I have ever seen in my life. Hitting the dog had ripped it in half under the chest, and the top half hadn't died yet. It was making the most awful noise and actually moving its paws, trying to move. Jeb couldn't move. I quickly grabbed his rifle out of the truck and put the poor creature out of its misery. Jeb still didn't move. He just stood there, looking at the mess of what used to be a beautiful animal. I gathered a tarp out of the truck, gathered the animal up, and put it in the truck. I couldn't leave the poor thing as a piece of roadkill after what happened. The poor animal didn't deserve that death, and I was going to take it home and bury it. Jeb was unable to drive. He could barely move, actually. I helped him into the passenger seat of the truck, and I took the wheel and drove him home. He told me it was okay, that I could keep his truck as long as I bring it back the next day. I took the truck home, buried the dog out in the field, and then went to sleep. The following day was hell for me. I took Jeb's truck over to his house, hoping he was feeling better and would give me a ride home. His parents told me that Jeb was disturbed and would not get out of bed. His parents asked me if I knew what was wrong, and I explained that we had accidentally hit a dog on the way home and he was taking it pretty badly. They understood, and his father gave me a ride home. I tried contacting Jeb over the next day, but he wouldn't answer his phone. When school was in session on Monday, I looked for my best friend, and he wasn't there. I tried calling him, but his cell phone was turned off. I was very, very worried about my friend. Jeb missed school all of that week. I was surprised that his parents would let him get away with it, but they did. He never called me back. Finally, on Friday night, I drove over to his house to see what was going on. His parents were out, and I was hoping to speak to him clearly. It took a while knocking on the door, but he finally came down and opened it. And when he did, I barely recognized him. He was pale and thin and just looked completely awful. His eyes were dark and had huge bags under them. "Man, are you okay? You look terrible," I told him. He barely moved, barely reacted, just gave me a little shrug. "I'm sorry. I haven't wanted to talk to anyone." "Man, I know what happened was terrible, and seeing that dog like that was horrible, but it was an accident," I tried to tell him. His eyes were glazed over. "The dog," he whispered. "I buried the dog," I told him. "It's in a field in my backyard." Jeb began shaking, his body first and then his head. "No, you didn't," he told me. "You couldn't have." I was immediately even more concerned for my friend than I had been, and I tried to calm him down. "Yes, I did," I consoled Jeb. "I buried it and said a prayer over it and—" "No, you couldn't have," Jeb repeated, more nervous and shaking than before. "Yes, Jeb, I did," I told him again. "No, you couldn't have because the dog is fucking right there," he screamed, pointing behind me. I spun around and didn't see anything. I heard Jeb tell me, "It's crawling towards me. It's been after me all fucking week for what I fucking did to it." Before I could turn back around, my friend had slammed and locked the door. I began banging on the door and yelling for him to open the door. He didn't. He ran off up the stairs and back to his room. I continued to try to get him to open the door, but he refused. Eventually, I had to leave. Over the following months, I didn't see much of my best friend. The few times I did, he was very weak and pale like before. He was always nervous, and he never talked to anyone. Before school ended, though, he disappeared. I never heard from him again, but I was told that he eventually had to stay at a psych ward. He was obsessed with what he had done to that dog, and he was always convinced that the dog was after him for what he did. I don't believe in ghosts, so I can't believe that he was seeing a ghost. It had to be guilt. Guilt because he was smoking pot that night and driving high, and guilt for what his decision had done to that poor, innocent dog. The sight of it was disgusting, and it drove him crazy. I saw it too, and it was disturbing. But I'm still shocked at what the accident did to the mental health of someone who had been my best friend for most of my life. Good evening. I want to thank LadySpook for joining me on this compilation of stories. To see the next 3 stories in the collaboration, please visit LadySpook's page by clicking the link either here or in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to click the like button. If you are not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please click the button next to the tabby to subscribe. This will keep you informed of new content. I've included a link to a new horror channel called Why It Sucks. As my listeners know, I like to help out new channels whenever I can, so please take a listen to a video there if you can. Why It Sucks also made the graphic that I have momentarily put up on my profile picture. On a personal note, I recently hit 5,000 subscribers. I want to thank each and every one of you for this. 5,000 was very important to me, as I have noted before, because when I started, another narrator with 5,000 subscribers put me down as not having what it takes to be as popular as he was. He was the biggest naysayer I've had so far, so it's nice to know that he was wrong. I've worked hard to entertain you, and this makes me happy that you've chosen to reward me by joining up and subscribing to my channel. Thank you. Please look forward to a Valentine's Day post from me as well, and a video collaboration with Hero to Villain of Paranormal Tales. Please check out his channel, also in the description, as I believe he is an up-and-coming narrator who will be really big someday. You will really enjoy his videos. Plus, he likes to do contests where people who subscribe or share videos will win Amazon gift cards that he provides, so there is incentive to that as well, but believe me, the real incentive to subscribing to him is that he is very talented and he is going to be a very successful narrator and he will really entertain you. Then, all that's left to say is, in closing, remember to check in your closet and check under the bed, because you never know where a killer orange cat might be hiding. Good night.